Recording in progress.
Thanks, Claire.
Hey everyone, this is gonna be a pre-recorded Q&A situation. Um, we are taking a quick break between seasons, but we will be doing another episode later in December. This is gonna be specific to YouTube. Just trying to keep it pretty simple. I know I said I would do a bit of a Q&A situation at the end of the last episode, so I figured we might as well do it this way because I doubt this will be any longer than I don't think this will be an hour long. So we'll see how it goes. But let's go ahead and kind of get into this. Jeff, right here, as we see, is our lovely producer. Will be joining me today. Unfortunately, Az and Jamie could not make it because it's December and people have lives, unlike myself. So
Well, I
this,
am single for sure, although I have a first date tomorrow,
ooh,
round about lunchtime.
nice. I
Yeah, she
bet.
lives a little far away, but I'm 47 years old, so I'm going to take a risk.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I shouldn't talk about my dating life on air, so that'll be the last we hear of that.
Fair enough. Um, well, let's go ahead and get to this. Before we get on to other people, Jeff, did you have any questions you wanted to ask me about the season that we just had?
Oh, so many. Um, let's see. Well, it was 10 episodes
Mhm.
plus some side hangs. If we focus on Operation Redacted, it was strong from the beginning, but your narrative, I don't know how much you had planned, but your narrative sort of wove like on a loom to a beautiful cloth fabric at the end there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Uh, that see, what you don't know, viewer, is that prior to this, Jeff had mentioned that he was going to give me some compliments, and my brain was like, "But he doesn't mean it." I mean, he probably does, but yeah. Anyway, uh,
Dean and
luckily,
I have different love languages. I want compliments constantly. I crave it. And Dean is like, oh, I don't deserve it, or something along those lines.
this is literally one of the reasons why my ex and I, who we're still friends with, by the way, but
Oh, cool.
my friends and I were both like, yeah, but neither of us can accept compliments, even if it is true. So we had the same issue. Um, but yeah, as for what's the episode, I was trying to keep things fairly tight. Not in a way where you all couldn't do things, they couldn't shape the world, but enough where the story is pretty self-concealed for the most part. Um, except uh, self-concealed for the most part, but had room to have some added to it. That was the kind of general idea. I will say that I didn't follow the suggested game pattern that Monster of the Week has, but I felt like as like an overarching storyline was a little bit more important, and this is more of a mechanic situation. Is the reason why I chose it. So, uh,
Talk about that. You're probably not done yet.
no, go ahead, go ahead. Talk about what?
Um, the developing it, like rolling with the changes, you know. Wait, now I can't hear you.
No, you're good. I forgot to unmute myself in my car. Great A producer work on my part. Uh, the way I game master in and outside of these calls is to make plot points and plot events, which are not quite the same, and fit them into the campaign. It's kind of like the players are making the car and I'm the one introducing the parts is the best way to explain it, I guess. So I'll have the engine on the standby ready for you all to get to the point where I can put the engine into the car, so to speak. This is an analogy, which is weird because later someone's going to ask me what I know about cars, and the answer is basically nothing. Uh, but
So
that's
there's
the
a big thing in the front that makes noise, does
yeah,
something with oil, and then
exactly.
there's this tube at the back that spits out whatever's left.
Yeah, and that's the basic idea behind it. It's just it was like y'all gave me your characters. I had the concept. I had the activating event. This is I'm sure someone better at writing than I am. Consider put this in better words, but there's what I consider the activating event. Whatever brought the main characters to doing whatever that they're doing, right? So, and I like to structure these campaigns in like a 4-act structure, 3 to 4 act structure. I think a bit like a writer. That sounds very self-conceited, by the way. I regret that, but yeah, it's the
This
truth.
is a celebration of your genius. So
Uh,
don't feel weird about it.
sure, we all were having a great time. uh, but yeah, that was the idea. It was just like I make the plot points, I make the plot events, and then I introduce them as they fit in the campaign. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Just like there was I had a whole scene planned to introduce what happened to Danny's wife, like in greater details. Uh, and uh, I introduced it towards the end, and then as Danny was walking into the memory, like if you go back to episode 10 or 9, I think it was. Danny walks into the memory of what his wife was going through that night and just nopes out. I was like, well, there's no good way to bring that into the story at this point. That's a dead end.
Well, I guess you could have had me do one of those horror things where I go through the door and then I come right back through the same door.
It it did. I just don't like railroading players. Uh, like
Yeah,
I
that's
may
tricky, especially because on air, sometimes asking them can sort of disrupt the flow. And it
yeah.
sounds like you were like, well, this might go somewhere good. And so it fleshed out Danny's desire to like just take care of his wife's killing situation and don't think about it too much and don't dwell on it because it's horrifying.
Oh, for certain. And it was all just how to put it. There are times when I don't get to introduce plot lines. Something happens because we're not just a show; we're a live show for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So if something doesn't get brought up, then it's just not gonna happen sometimes. So that was just like when Danny walked out, I was like, well, yeah, I guess that's not gonna happen, and it's fine because sometimes we don't know what happens to people in our lives, so it just happens, or we don't know all the details anyway. I went on a side tangent there. Sorry, did you have any more questions? You know what? It is a Q&A. Let me ask you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Uh, what inspired Danny? What made you want to play Danny?
Well, number one, I wanted to play pretend that I was in a loving marriage, and and I really got to focus on her needs. Like that was sort of wish fulfillment for like something I never really had. Or I sort of, you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I
Difficult,
gotcha.
difficult marriage. It's over. But anywho, yeah. So that was the deal. And then it was like, well, what does a professor look like? And I was like, I don't know, brown hair, tweed jacket, sort of a less shitty version of Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
Okay,
Um,
that's very
and
fair.
and yeah, he's taken just like Jack. He's taken 6 months to write and like a sabbatical after his wife's death. And she wants him to go to this little town of Weston, and he's gonna go. So then it was like, well, he's not really Sam or Dean from Supernatural, even though his story is a little similar, because he's sort of nebbishy. But I decided that he's super handsome,
Mm.
like Sam. I think it's Sam, right? The tall one with the black
I
hair.
I don't. They both have dark hair. I don't know. Dean is the one with the short hair. If it helps, I know that because we share a name.
Yeah,
Uh,
there you go. So he had sort of a similar flair as Sam, and then but he was going to have that sort of Dale Cooper Like he can talk to anyone,
Mhm.
and like out of any group, he can fake being the most normal, even though he's dealing with some crazy ass shit.
Uh, can I say that I like Danny's character in the aspect that while the other two were ready to throw down many times, Danny was like, hold up, let's
Yeah, I don't want to go to jail.
yeah.
Let's ease off a little bit.
That that's why I like it wasn't quite the turn heel, but like the evolution of the character that towards the very last episode, he knew when it was time to act to be violent in the last episode. Not just the bicycle built for two jousting, but the final boss fight at the end. It was like unlike prior episodes, Danny would have hesitation. At that point, he was like, I need to do this. So there was less hesitation. But I like the character progression because initially he didn't even want to touch a gun, let alone fire at somebody.
Yeah,
So
violence. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, I like the idea. I like when people play pacifist characters well. So I enjoyed Danny's character as kind of like a bit of a pacifist character who had to find a level of violence that is acceptable to them. Um,
Yeah, and it really what happened was because of his powers, like God or whoever can help him out from time to time, and his wife can handle some of the dangerous bits, like standing in front of Pete's hood and like scaring him into turning away from the crowd. So it was like a more forceful thing, but still doing the same thing, which is like protecting people's bodily
oh yeah.
bodies, I guess.
I always felt like no one in their characters wasn't part of it, even if they weren't fighting. Like in your case, you weren't fighting, but you were always contributing. I sound very utilitarian when I say this, but yeah, I was saying everyone was involved. So I really enjoyed like it was a peaceful character, but was still willing to protect people and stuff like that. So it was really interesting. Um,
So you asked me what inspired me to make Danny. I think this would be a good time to read Az's answer to that question.
yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to trade off or just have me read the whole thing?
Why don't you? I will do as, and you could do Jamie if you would like.
Perfect.
All right, so we did ask our ghosts who were not able to make it here today, what inspired their characters. Why don't you go ahead and start with Jamie real quick because he left us a little note there.
Cool. So Raffi was inspired by the actor Max von Sydow, specifically his role in 3 Days of the Condor, a 70s spy movie starring Robert Redford. I was used to seeing Max as a young man playing chess against the devil, or as an old store clerk who basically is the devil, so seeing him in middle age as a spy, spoiler, stuck with me. See, I don't think I've seen it. So I'm glad he didn't spoil it there. That's really cool. He says, I forget why I picked that particular playbook. I think the main reason was Jeff and Az seemed to be fairly grounded characters, right? At least at
Right.
the start. So I wanted to pick a more out there playbook, like The Monstrous. It also felt like those two had investigation handled, so I should probably fill in as a combat type. So that's how we got our battle doctor, which
Yeah.
is not a thing you usually see in media.
Well, like one of the first rules of the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm, and Denny definitely did some harm. So,
Right, right.
uh,
I think we saw that with Julian Bashir in Deep Space Nine, and I had another one. Well, every once in a while, the Doctor from Classic Who would just pick up a gun and shoot.
that's
Um,
that is
yeah.
bizarre. I have not watched a lot of Doctor Who. What you just told me was bizarre. I guess that sounds very out of
Uh huh.
character.
Yeah, definitely. John Pertwee would do Venusian Aikido
Mm.
to like knock people out,
Uh,
but not kill them.
I want to say real quick. For one, Danny. What? No, Ra- Jamie was playing a divine. That was the name of his playbook. Um,
Yeah.
and I want to tell everyone, and I'm sure maybe that Jamie will watch this later, hopefully. Uh, one thing I liked about Raffi throughout the series, one thing I, as the game master, liked about Raffi is that he is both a very goofy character, but also entirely enigmatic. You knew very little about Raffi, but he seemed like he was always like a personality there to be down for whatever. So
He was so gentle and supportive that you almost never think to ask about himself.
exactly, it's like there's people who are always willing to help someone else, but you know very little about their personal life. And that's, I like that as someone who used to be a pretty bad people pleaser, for one, for people that know what's going on in my life, but also because we at the end of the series, while we have an understanding of Raffi a little, we still don't have an understanding of who he is. Like, there's only two people who really know his background, and that's me and
Well, right,
Jamie.
we don't have at this point any lore. It's kind of like Supernatural's first season. Like we don't have any lore about angels.
Yeah,
Where they
and
come from, what their deal is. Are they just like the ones from like Jewish tradition, or are they more like modern?
I
Are they something completely different?
so uh and that's on purpose, believe it or not. Because while I have an idea in my head about the answers to all that, I wanted the world to be just empty enough, like big enough where you feel the supernatural, but empty enough where, like, if you wanted to run something like you have, with our side hangs, you could do your own thing. Or if Az wanted to be a keeper for a session, do his own thing or whatever, somebody could play something in that world and fill in the blanks that they want to fill in. So like, if down the line, if we revisit this world and Az wants to talk about angels, Az could bring in their own version of the angels. I wanted the world to feel big and expansive, but empty enough where anybody could include their own stuff to it.
Yeah, and that makes me think of a lot of our player collaborations and like input. You're
That
really good about like asking for that, but also like accepting it, even when it's like we literally wore what video game character
yes,
furry suits to the diner
yes, yes.
at the same time as a special agent was taking a fake agent into custody.
Yeah. I well, one of the things I found, because like I'm not just a game master. I listen to other people's media. I do like listen to the Adventure Zone and Dimension 20, and I'm not really a Matt Mercer's group kind of person, but I've heard some of his stuff. It's pretty good. So I try and take in what I can that makes sense, but it's not like outright stealing. And one of the things I found that really gets players interested in the story is allowing them to develop not just their character, but like bits and pieces of the world. Like, you know, I try to give like some restraints of like, hey, let's not go crazy with it. But if you wanted to name a character, hold on, I think I have it right here. If you wanted to name a
Character names are a good way of doing comedy.
if you wanted to
Like
name a character Julia Roberts, Childs, Hatzeldorf, Bettendorf, Namco, Nintendo Namco, excuse me. I was like,
Nintendo Namco.
is that ridiculous? Yes. Did it get you all more invested in the scene with the character? Also, yes.
I wanted to know so much about that character that I asked you for our side hang if we could do her early career as a detective.
Oh yeah, no. Hey, if you want to bring her back or any of the characters, that's fine. It's just keep in mind that like prior to season one, if they did not know about the supernatural, they didn't know about the supernatural. That's like
Totally.
they may be like a believer of the supernatural, like, oh yeah, Bigfoot's real or whatever, but they would
But
have
it's
not,
more like a faith than a certainty.
yeah, they've not encountered the supernatural before. It's more just like, oh yeah, I go to a witch doctor every Tuesday or something like that, that kind of thing. So they haven't experienced it personally, but they may believe in it, that kind of thing. And the idea is
Yeah.
relatively the same idea. Um,
So check out on that note, check out our stories from the Z Files showdown at Samson Mill.
yep.
Um Not to spoil it, but a character doesn't find out even at the end exactly what the monster was, but if they had, their mind would have been confused at the least.
I'm gonna go ahead and do as is description for their character.
Cool.
Um, I was inspired to play Hal mostly because I was finishing the TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. right as we started. There's a character in the later season named Enoch who quickly became my favorite member. Quickly became my favorite. Sorry, he is a member of a synthetic race of time traveling beings who joins the main team to prevent an apocalypse from reaching Earth. He's very robotic and speaks mostly neutrally, but still has a big heart, and it shows. Enoch is the main inspiration for Hal, and also serves as to why he gave Dean the okay to make Hal's backstory foggy. Um, and there's a follow up to that. I'll get that here in a moment. I will say, um, one of the things I love as a game master, both in and out of the show, is when a player allows me to develop like a little bit of their background, not in its entirety, or if it gives me enough where I can like, hey, let's meet solo one on one, talk your character, right? So when Az gave me the go ahead to do something with a foggy background, like I think it happened, and you maybe could watch it in the first episode, like the light that just like flooded my like was when Az said mysterious background. That's literally the moment I got like, oh well, maybe Az is one of these like dream constructs, so to speak. As his character's a dream construct. And then from there I had to develop like how they were made, how what their presence would be like in the world. Like that lack of that prompt but lack of information allowed me to help build the world at the same time. Was an interesting note. Because at like one point I was like, all right, well, Hal got hurt, but Hal is made out of basically dream particulates or psychic particulates, right? So unless the gap is filled in by Jeffrey, the one who created him, he wouldn't necessarily bleed blood. But if you go back, I think it was like episode 4 or 5, when Jeffrey bumps into him by accident after he sees the rainbow particulates coming out of his side, and then later the like next session or something like that, he just sees normal blood. That was me kind of hinting at pretty early on that Jeffrey was behind not just the cryptid showing up, but Hal's very existence as a metahuman, as I've been calling them.
So we should have known already at that point that
I,
Hal was a construct.
I wouldn't say necessarily that was a situation, because I kind of was laying down the footwork for that since basically episode 1. I was hinting at, you know, every episode that wasn't like mostly combat or resolving a situation was me hinting at. Sorry. All right, the dead air, so you can cut the dead air from the cough. Sorry. Um, the idea was to kind of like drop that throughout every episode as much as I could, while it still fit into the plot. That Hal was a construct. It wasn't until like the 9th episode where like or eighth episode I was finally able to confirm it. And like we had a thing you posted in our group Discord about like favorite moment. The fact that I got to tell that, I finally got to reveal that after at that point like 5 months or something like that of holding that secret in, was probably my favorite scene, because I finally got to do this thing. I was like, I can't wait to bring this in, this very big plot point. uh
Well, you just broke the seal on our awards. We kind of talked about some of our favorite things, and that sounded like wildest surprise.
I mean,
Jamie also agreed Hal is not real. And what did I say?
Well, real quick,
Hal being made up. Hal being made up is the wildest surprise.
Like I asked Az, like, you know, follow up. What were your thoughts on an overall twist and how it played into your character? And Az said, I love the twist. I felt like I was as shocked as Hal, but it was really fun to suddenly flip the switch to play along and go for the ride. Because one of my other jamming tricks is that you all are all the main characters. So while I had the plot points and I sometimes nudge you, you ultimately are the one moving the plot. I'd like to do player driven. Anyway, and we can go on to the section there about the awards, if you will, here in a second. But that was just like that was the scene I've been holding on to for several sessions. I like not the exact scene, but like the reveal basically is what I've been holding on to for several sessions, and I was genuinely happy. I was funny because I'm stuttering a lot. When I have a plot point that's I hold on to for a long time, I can't wait to reveal it. It's kind of like a person holding a like buy you gift, and you just want to give it to them. It's
It's
like
so hard.
right. It's like I bought you this gift, and I want to give it to you, but I don't want to wait to your birthday. It's the
Anytime I
same
think
way.
of something like that, I go, who of my friends won't I play this again with? Who who would care? And like it's a very small list. And then I'm like, and should I ask them if they want to hear about this before I just send this missive? I guess it's why social media exists. But
Right.
then if you don't have a forum for like spoiler chat, like I guess we could do that on our Discord, or put those bars around like Jamie did
Well,
to make it fuzz out.
the reason why I didn't tell you all, one thing I was worried about is that I don't try and take away player agency for the most part. Like 90% of the time, you all have agency. Changing, doing that what I could with Hal's background at times was like I'm worried about removing the player agency a little. Luckily, Az was down for it.
Cool,
Um,
yeah.
uh, but the reason why I didn't bring that up in a spoiler for you all to know ahead of time is because I wanted you to be just as shocked as the character was. Uh, because I'm not just performing to our audience on Twitch or YouTube, since you're probably watching this on YouTube. I don't want it to be just for them. I want you all as the players to also find out and be feeling the same like feelings that your characters would be, because I think it adds some authenticity to your characters and how they react. Um, and it makes it more fun. It literally just makes it more fun in general.
Okay. Um any other overall things before we drill down into the details?
Oh, here's some keeper notes.
Ooh,
Just
sweet.
some side bits here. I named
And
this
my
the
apologies to the listener if y'all can hear my stomach growling. If it's too bad, I'll replace the audio with my I can cut that out of my track.
uh one of the things um one of the notes about the world about how I develop things uh is I named the town Weston because I wanted to name something after Adam West because he is a Washington State native, right?
No shit.
Yeah, that was literally the reason why. Uh, like he is a very he in his in the 70s and 80s, he was a very controversial figure. And not very, he was a somewhat controversial figure, but I cannot deny his impact on pop culture, not just as Batman, but in general.
Do you
Um,
mean him as an actor?
yeah, him as an actor, he wasn't like Bill Cosby bad, but apparently he was like he's not Bill Cosby bad, but he was like snorting some substances and going to some kinds of parties that I don't think YouTube will allow if we don't get demonetized. Uh, like as far as I'm aware, everyone was consenting, and it was the 70s. But he was a bit of a party animal, from my understanding.
Mm.
But
So it doesn't necessarily mean we can't enjoy the 60s Batman's antics.
exactly. Um, uh, and I was like, I chose Washington State because I wanted something that was foggy and misty, but it isn't the East Coast because every time that it's in fiction, it's always on the East Coast, right? It's like Maine, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, whatever. That's I want something different because I'm contrarian like that. So I chose the West Coast. I chose Washington State. I don't know how foggy it gets there, in fairness.
Well, you just happen to have somebody on your show who lives
Exactly.
there. And so I was able to be like, well, like, why don't we uh I was like, well, Forks is basically nothing, and it like you still have to drive to get to the beach, and the beaches there aren't very great. So I was able to be like, well, here's how you could make it both more authentic and just better.
No,
So that was fun.
I I did internalize some of that immediately to make it feel more like Washington State. Maybe I could have reached out and asked like, "Hey, what's some local stuff that I can incorporate into it?" Hindsight's 2020 now, but
Well, what I
uh,
love about the Omniversal Escapades universe, or at least the Operation Redacted universe, is that things that are second best or no longer exist are like the thing.
oh,
And so, yeah, maybe Washington State is better than it is, or more interesting, or cooler. I don't know. In the
I don't.
movies and in the X Files, like everything's closer together. You don't have to drive for 6 hours to get anywhere.
That's true. And in fairness, when I implemented that, which our viewers may not know this, but we brought that in to the pre-series campaign just to kind of get to know each other as players. Uh, I was like, well, for one, it's a funny joke, and and two, some of these things are defunct, so I doubt we get sued by bringing them in. Like Kmart, I don't think Kmart's around anymore. Uh, but yeah,
Tab,
Tab, yeah,
RC Cola.
RC Cola is around. Please don't come as RC. Like,
Next, we're going to be like, Necco wafers are the best candy. And it's
uh,
like, oh no. What have we
I mean,
done? Wait, Bita Honey or Big
bit of
Hunk?
bounty. Uh, what was that? Uh, something Chew, Charleston Chew. Do
Oh,
people
I
eat?
eat
Oh,
them quite a lot. I love the strawberry.
um, but
But
yeah.
yeah, a lot of people would find that old timey and weird.
Oh, circus peanuts. That would have been one I could have brought in. Oh, I.
Oh, sweet Lord. I only had those once and I hated every second of it.
It's like hey, don't come at circus peanuts. This is our opinion, not an official stance. But
Don't come at me, circus peanuts.
but it's like chewing styrofoam and just as tasty. Uh, um, but yeah, so I named the town Weston after Adam West. I based it out of Washington for that same reason, and because I was like, well, let's bring in a Washington State native because Adam West is from Walla Walla, right? They even have a statue dedicated to him after his death. So I was like, Weston, not West Town, Weston, which is more of an English way of spelling. But yeah, I was like, yeah, Weston. Um, that was the kind of general idea. Uh, bit of world building notes there, I guess.
The more I'm thinking about Adam West, the more I'm thinking about my family members from Eastern Washington. I don't know anybody like specifically from Walla Walla, but I know there's a prison there, and that's about their most claim to fame. But yeah, he's a little bit like my dad and like uncles, sort of big-bodied hero,
Right. Um,
kind of
it's
goofy way of talking.
well, Adam West is known as a goofy talker. I never would have guessed.
Apologies to my friends and family in Eastern Washington, but from a West Coast perspective, you're kind of goofy talkers.
Hey, as somebody who is from the West Coast, can confirm.
They say stuff like wheelbarrow
Oh,
and
okay.
and Washington.
Oh, okay. So it's an interesting note because where I live now, I don't live on the West Coast, but I'm from the West Coast. But where I live now in the Midwest, they don't. You'll sometimes come across somebody who doesn't say like towel; they'll say like washcloth. But there's some accents get so thick they'll say like washcloth. I wish I was joking about that. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, that kind of thing. But yeah, uh,
Washcloth.
washcloth. Yeah. Uh, go wash your hands, stuff like that. Uh, all right. Did you have any other questions, Jeff, for me?
Overall, well, what about just like basic behind the scenes? What's it been like to run a stream? Because I believe this is your first time running one
Uh, this is
or
not my first.
directing.
Yeah, I would say this is not my first time being on a show. I've been on your network a few times, and I have my own back from like 2017 to 2019, I think. I took a long break from that. Break that show's canceled. I'll be honest, we're not coming back to it.
Oh, it's
Uh,
so shitty to think about our defunct podcasts. I've got 4, maybe 5. I've
the
got one
kicker,
that's sort of on hiatus.
the kicker is in the last episode, I said we're going to be back in a few months. We're taking a break. I swear we'll be back, and that was 2019.
It's like breaking up with a girlfriend or partner generally. Like, you're probably never gonna
Mm,
get back. Like, one of my favorite podcasts was Liar City.
mm.
And yeah, their last episode. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. It's like, no. But
Uh,
yeah, Sinister Parent Company went belly up. So like 2 of my favorite shows were shows that I was on because I'm that conceited. But like we did musical improv, long form improv, like wacky product pitches, movie sort of fake movie synopses. Like, yeah, I miss that stuff. But it's like having written a book that's out of print or a CD from a band that like nobody can find. Although now there's Bandcamp, but never mind. Forget I've
yeah.
said anything.
And for reference, like now that I'm in my 30s, I don't know what it is, but I want to try my hand at improv, not just what we do here. And part of me is just like, what are you doing with your 30s if you're like want to get into improv just like the middle of your in the early part of your 30s? Uh, uh, that's just me personally, though, for reference. But improv shows do sound like they'd be like a ton of fun to be part of at the very least. Uh,
Oh, fuck. It was incredible. Something happened right away. Or something wonderful happened right away. Happens right away?
uh,
Happened? Happens. And then good idea. Those are both just a delight to be on.
I,
But
I,
yeah, similarly, I was in my late 30s before I started improv. And I only did it in the context of podcasting.
I, I've been technically doing some form of improv since my teen years. In that aspect, that's when I got into like Dungeons and Dragons. And nothing teaches you more about improv than being a dungeon master. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was slightly more rules than normal improv. But anyway, as far as being one of the hosts on this show, but the one running the game, it's interesting because as a game master outside of this, I've been a game master for like 32 now, so it's been like 14 years. I want to say I've been a game master for 14 years. I've been a player for about 15 years, give or take. Um, One second. Sorry, I don't know why I want to cough. Um, it's different. Performing live, being a podcast game master, and being a performer are 3 different jobs normally. Um, so as a game master, I had to make the plot. I had to set the plot hooks, the scenes. Well, I've already explained some of my concepts. Um, as a host, you have to move things along to keep things interesting as best you can. Uh, since we're doing it live, even more so because it's a Twitch show, right? So the audience is watching it live, right? There's no like you've done editing. If there's dead air, you just
Okay, see, we now do a side quest on Shattered Worlds RPG. The show is supposed to be about the game I created and playtesting that. Um, so when we started doing this D&D thing, it's like, I'm so glad it's not streamed because there's so much dead air or like gaps or like rules checking. I don't know how Matt Mercer keeps that interesting. Maybe that's why there's 7 or 8 people on it, so there's no dead air. But yeah,
They
I just constructed my game specifically to be simple and work on a podcast.
and that's the other part. When we were choosing games, I tried to revere as far as I could from my preferred table games, because they tend to be a bit rule crunchy, and not very interesting from a narrative standpoint. Like Pathfinder is one of my favorite games in general, but Pathfinder tabletop RPGs are not interesting in a like podcast sense, because it's very rule crunchy. Like a lot of math involved, and unless you have all that stuff set up ahead of time and a lot of preparation, which all of us have jobs in addition to this. I cannot expect you all to do that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
I
I
was
played Pathfinder briefly online with an online group, and yeah, the way he described it, he did a lot of work with Roll20 to like get it all locked in. Or maybe it wasn't Roll20, but it was Pathfinder, a lot of stuff that was automated.
Yeah. Um,
The
and I,
idea of doing that in person, flipping the books, God no. Mm.
well, and as you mentioned, like the dead air as a Twitch show, it has to be something narrative where we don't get bound up by a lot of rules. It allows me to improv some stuff, because like there isn't normally just like a plus sharp rule, right? There's a set list of rules or moves. But I was like, this gives me some freedom to be like, hey, no, just do a plus sharp, and what you roll will determine how much of this thing you will see. That's the idea. It still falls into like, there's a mixed success and a complete success and a complete failure in the spectrum for the game. The idea when I was doing the plus sharp is the same idea. If you rolled under, you didn't notice anything. If you rolled mixed success, you kind of saw it, and then complete success, you just saw it. Right. That was the idea. Um, it allowed me some improvisation on that aspect. But if you were doing like Pathfinder as an example, once again, one of my favorite games, but there's a set list of rules and people argue over them. I don't think we do that, but the rules are very inflexible for these types of shows, and that could hurt pacing. Um, as a GM, I could just change a rule on a notice, but then you need to be consistent with that rule. If you're inconsistent with the rule, then it's unfair to the players, and because it does cause like plot holes if you're
And
not
if
careful.
and for a game that has so many rules, unless all the players are fully experienced at that specific game and are caught up on any rules changes, man, I can't even imagine. It's so hard to edit the D&D side quest that I made it a Patreon exclusive so I could just take my time. We've got like 10 episodes banked or whatever that I still need to edit.
For certain.
So now that we've complained about the hard stuff, what has been your feeling about your relationship with the players and our general vibe and how that goes?
I like it because you all give me some trust, not just with the campaign, but with your characters. And I try my best to not break that trust by taking some player agency out of the equation. Um, Overall, I think we vibe pretty well with each other, because everyone has their own perspective. Everyone brings in with their own interesting characters. So I've been enjoying. I genuinely been enjoy working with you and Jamie. Um,
Y'all are so great. Like, if I can just gush for a minute, I've had several shows. I was talking to Dean about some before we started. I've had like 6 or 7. I don't know. Um, and a big part of it is trying to get that vibe right. And especially in live streaming, like you want it as soon as possible because there's only going to be so many episodes. Like, it's not like a TV show where you have months to write every episode, break it down, and it's going to be like, what are your characters like now? What's their arc? Where are they going? You want to get there right away. And we came in. It probably helped that me and Jamie are already on a show together, Shattered Worlds RPG. What? Um, but also, like, it seemed like you and Az had a good rapport going, and yeah, we just gelled. Probably helped that you and I had worked together before. Um, yeah, we all seem to have a similar interest in comedy and role playing, and not too caught up on rules lawyering.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like, and in fairness, I came across as because uh to address everything, I've known you for a couple of years now. I just met Jamie prior to this show, right? And I know as I've only known as for about like 2 or 3 months before we started the series.
Oh wow.
And the reason for that, one of my personal mental things is just go with the flow on most stuff, right? If someone's a little too annoying, then I'll walk away, that kind of thing. Uh, but for Az, I had previously talked with Az because I am in contact with Colin M. Parker. We brought him up in like the last episode. But I know people from the Scavengers Network, so I had met as through friends of a friend sort of situation, right? So and as is pretty easygoing from what I can tell. So it was just like pretty easy for us to gel together. Um, and that's the thing when I was looking out to reach out to you and as and we had another person who was going to be on, but she couldn't join us because of life, which is understandable.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Oh yeah. We've been lucky as far as streams go. The couple I was involved in before, like scheduling was just couldn't keep it consistent,
yeah,
or couldn't I don't know. Once you lose a player after you've started, it can be a little disruptive.
for certain. That's uh, on a normal game that can be an issue. On a live show, that's a whole other issue, right? So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
whenever
I mean, people are going to be coming to your show, right? Because they like a particular person's vibe, or they like everyone, hopefully, but like maybe they come in already having known somebody. And if that person just abruptly leaves, like, I used to listen to Nerd Poker a lot. That was probably my first actual play.
Mhm.
And the DM left, Sark, and then Sarah left, who was their only lady. And so there began this short period of like broiness that hadn't really been there before. And then I dropped off. I haven't gone back. And then I found the Adventure Zone and the McElroy brothers and you and, like all of that journey. Um, but yeah, it was a shame to lose that person, but it was nice that it happened before episode 1.
Yeah, for certain. And then you brought in Jamie, and
Oh,
uh,
Jamie's the greatest.
I am I have a hard time. I don't know if it's age or whatever. I have a hard time clicking with people initially, because I'm a pretty reserved person. But Jamie has genuinely been a great person to work with. To be honest, everyone, don't get me wrong, everyone in the show has been, but
Yeah, absolutely.
Jamie has been one of like the easiest people I've had to work with because not only is he down for most things, as long as you're not like doing bad things to him, which is pretty understandable. But he has creative ideas. He brings in creative things, and he can work a scene. That's the other thing, by the way. You had asked about this. Being on the show, we're not just players; we're also performers, and sometimes the performer has to work the scene. And you all did great because there's some people who do not know how to work a scene.
Well, that's a key component of improv. It took me a while to learn. Um, Aiden was kind of our improv teacher. He was getting all the professional classes, and then he'd bring that info to us. But it's about working to the top of your ability.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes even when you're not in the scene or like talking, right? You're still there, bro. And you never know when, like, and with a show like those shows, which have like specific improv games kind of built into them, you can like adjust the scene from outside. But with actual plays, it's kind of like your meta jokes. That's where those come out. Or you can help somebody complete their turn faster if they're like starting to struggle with an idea. You can be like, have you considered blah, blah, blah. Or you make a joke that then becomes canon. So if all of you are like dialed in, the show just zips. And that's what it's like on Shattered Worlds RPG. That's what it's like here. And just day one, yeah, both Jamie and Az working to the top of their ability.
Admittedly, I don't know Jamie's background and this kind of stuff. He might have been doing some improv with you and Aiden. I know Az has history in theater. I think that's what helped them.
Yeah, I haven't asked Jamie where his prior performance stuff was. He's a game designer, which is like the thing I know most about him. He's a little like Raffi in that he's so like gentle and like a great listener and like interviewer kind of that I don't know as much about him. I should just that's kind of what we did, asking him questions before we started. He gave us some answers to our award ideas. Should we go to that now, or is there anything else about Az or
I'm gonna
the show?
I need to stop gushing about my co-host, I guess.
By the way, we had a conversation before we started about how I probably shouldn't gush too hard about you and how great you are, because you'll feel uncomfortable and it'll grind to a halt, and you'll quit the show and like profound embarrassment.
Oh no, I wouldn't quit the show. I would just have the profound embarrassment. But
I'm just gonna sit with it. All right.
By the way, Jeff, I haven't said this on the show or meetings before the show. I want to thank you for being our primary producer on the Twitch end, and the video and the YouTube end. You have your own life outside of this. You have your own job I don't want to tell people in case you're a private person.
I'm a letter carrier. Up until recently, I was working a ton of overtime. So, it was a bit of a commitment to, but most of the time I loved the episode so much that I'd like crank out the audio, crank out the video. If the audio was synced right and sounded good, I'd just port it to YouTube that afternoon or evening. Whereas with a podcast, I'll just tinker for a week or two. So, but yeah, like I try not these days to take on responsibility that I'm not like super into. So like it's been just a joy to do the show and like to find like what's going to be the show title after listening to it 2 or 3 times, taking notes.
I've seen.
You know what? Just for illustration, I would like to pull up one of these notes from an earlier episode and check out these possible titles, because sometimes we don't celebrate the ones we didn't pick.
I do want to say, I would say real quick, I have seen the titles that you've chosen for the episodes, because I do check our YouTube, and you choose some bangers. I'm just gonna say this.
I think I still got Bentendo wrong in that one title, but
that's all good.
Anywho.
Hey, so look, it's a ridiculous name regardless, so I'm okay with it.
So let's see. I guess this was the last episode, maybe? Jeffrey made the creatures. This is a lot to take in. Jeffrey and Dad disappear. Sirens. Maybe that was the second to last episode. Anyway, we had Bonfire of the Dumpsters. Darth Nader. That's Richard Linklater. Darth Brooks. Regrettably, yes.
I remember that scene too.
Gris Canes, which was our like alt for Chris Gaines.
Yeah.
Simon and Darth Funkle. Pete will be arrested. Brit Box. Dream Premiums. I don't remember that one.
Oh.
This part's copyrighted. I don't know. No one suspects Bubsy and Gex. Oh, I don't know if I used that, but that's a top one there. This episode was full of them.
That, by the way, on that particular episode, I rolled with the punches because like there's a point that was like, yeah, you two were standing out, but like in a way that's still somewhat innocuous because the special agent was like, okay, I guess. Like you wouldn't think you're watching them, but you're just two dudes in fursuits apparently.
Right? Surely no self-respecting spy would dress up in such an outlandish way.
It's so obvious it couldn't be that situation. Basically, it was like, I don't think they're here. I think they're just weird people.
Yes.
Yeah. No. It's especially in the latter half, like the last 5 episodes of this series, we were hitting on all cylinders, and that's when you were like quoting the different names for the episode. It was like so many funny jokes.
Yeah, they just pile on each other. Hell yeah. What about Rift Action?
Oh yeah, that was
Jeff, draw my wife. Stinky Pete will fight again. And yeah, those are probably the best ones.
By the way, when I was developing the plot, I did not think in any way that Stinky Pete would go past the initial joke. I was just
because
like,
Az refused to let Stinky Pete die. They were like, I like this guy. He's gonna make it.
A bit of insight to the viewer here. After Stinky Pete's initial like introduction as a joke throwaway character, as said in our private chat, I cannot stop thinking about Stinky Pete. I think I'm going to make him into a character. I was like, okay, fine. Because he didn't say he was going to bring it into this campaign, just in general. And then lo and behold, a few sessions later, we're doing Just Side Hang, what was it? Legends from the Z Files, I think was the name of our side series. And he made Stinky Pete one of the characters. I was like, okay, that's not where I thought this was gonna go with this throwaway character. And then a few sessions later,
I can't remember how I incorporated him in there.
I was literally so we had discussed that Stinky Pete is somewhere from the southeast. He didn't specify anywhere. I don't think it.
Right.
It might have been like Alabama or Georgia, or just didn't specify. We kept it vague because it allows you to build more room with the character, you know. And I was playing this like wizard pretending to wizard is kind of a jerk because he's very direct, and it was just kind of like we went up to Washington State because Stinky Pete wanted to set up his own restaurant.
That's right. He came from. Oh, did he come from that, or was it like he existed on your show and then?
In the beginning, or maybe the mid part of the Fire Possum arc, right? You all needed someplace near the waste treatment plant.
Yeah, and for some bizarre reason, he camped his burger shack or whatever, like real close.
Like real close to the I was struggling to think of a name because you all had introduced it. I was like, I don't know what to name. Who builds a restaurant near a sewage plant? And then I think it was like Az was like, it's Stinky Pete's Bar and Grill. I was like, all right, sure, why not? And that character stuck in Az's head for this entire series since then, to the point where the players, and like the last 2 or 3 episodes, like, I know, let's ask Stinky Pete for help. I was like, there's already a character sheet made for him. All right, sure, yeah, bring in Stinky Pete, I guess.
Well, I think we've stumbled into our awards, which is favorite NPC. And Stinky Pete, I can't say this for sure because Az didn't answer this one, but they might go favorite NPC Stinky Pete.
More than likely. What about you? What about you? Like, we'll get to Jamie's list here in a second. What was your favorite NPC throughout the series?
It was 100% Kelly, Danny's wife. You were so great. I don't know. You just embodied this like modern woman, like she's still working from beyond the grave, and she like respects Danny and does whatever he asks her to do without complaint,
Well, it was,
within reason.
yeah, because the way I looked at it is when you asked her to do something, it was just like, well, for one, as a ghost, whatever, what else is she gonna do? But also, like, you weren't you weren't asking her like in a sexist way, go and make me a sandwich or whatever. It was like, hey, I'm trying to get this thing resolved, and it's very important because it'll save somebody. Could you do this for me? She's like, well, yeah, I guess so. That makes sense. That was the kind of general idea I had for running Kelly, like, and not just because technically she's a part of your character sheet, excuse me, right? She's technically part of your character sheet. That was for some of her abilities, or some of your abilities were based on her. So it wasn't just that. It was also because it was like Danny was pretty reasonable in his request throughout the series anyway. And I was like, could you go spy on? At one point, you had her go
Deputy
spy on.
Lawrence.
Yeah, Deputy Lawrence. I was like, yeah, that makes sense, And you are there to help find out basically how she died, more information, that kind of thing. You were there for her, so it made sense to her in my mindset to like, yeah, all right, it makes sense. So I'm glad that I got you like Kelly in that situation.
Well, I thought it was really great that like he was able to function as the romantic lead for the season. And it's rare that you see like a friendly married couple as the leads of a TV show or whatever. Like Scully and Mulder have a will they won't they. They can both be as quirky and as unpleasant as they want because it's like the chemistry is there.
Right.
But because they couldn't touch, that's the will they won't they. That's the like they can't have a good relationship really because,
And
they can't share their bodies and stuff.
there is a side note to that, by the way. When I was planning Danny's storyline, I was like, I like the character Danny. I don't entirely know how to wrap up his story in this series. And then I came up with two ideas. One was she sacrifices herself and tells Danny to move on. This is the gist of it, right? This is not the full one. There was gonna be a scene where because I had planned the end scene like weeks in advance, but was just didn't plan out all the details. But Jeffrey's father was going to attack Danny, and then she was going to sacrifice herself so that Danny could live. And like her like spiritual visage that was physical in the dream world would disappear, and her story was going to be like, "Hey, please move on." I was like, "Yeah." As touching as that would be, though, it's not very satisfying. So I went with my other idea, which is like, and I've already established this in universe anyway. Things that are made in either by like a dreamer or in this case Jeffrey, who's like a form of metahuman who's in between the two realms. If they appear in the physical realm, they can be altered and changed and be brought back to life. I was like, well, how about we just gave Danny the happy ending?
Yeah.
And I like bittersweet endings. That's why I considered the first ending I mentioned. But I was like, I also just like good endings for character development. So
Yeah, one thing I like so much about that is we never actually solved her murder, but because she was brought back to life, it just doesn't matter anymore. Like we might still interact with that creature or whatever in the future, but like who gives a shit? She's back to life,
see, and that goes back to something I said earlier in our talk. I had planned a scene to explain why it was happening, but Daddy noped the fuck out
because that monster was a dream creation, right?
Basically, yeah. Like if we ever go back to that series, I'm not against going back to Operation Redacted, but for now that is over. But the basic idea is, it was going to be something dream related. That was the reason why she died in the first place and why her ghost came back. There was a whole scene planned, and Danny would have found out. But when he noped out, that was just like, as the game master and as the co-host, was like, well, that scene's not going to happen. We're not going to find the explanation this episode. Maybe down the line.
And if we think of his story as like a romance novel or like a whatever adjacent genre fiction, like that's how you want those stories to end, like a cozy mystery.
Yeah.
You want the main characters to keep solving crimes or whatever.
And that's the reason why I went with the nicer ending for Danny rather than the bittersweet ending, because I wanted the good ending, and I also didn't feel like I'd earned the bittersweet ending at the same time. As the game master, like I could have just jumped it out there. I don't know how you would have reacted to you as the performer, but in my head, I was like, the campaign did not earn that bittersweet ending, regardless. There are times I can't think of anything offhand, but if you ever watch a
So
movie,
if I can give you an alt really quick, I could have met somebody in town. Like we were going all around town, like
that's
meeting
true.
all kinds of available women, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Like the librarian at the Newman Library. Like there were opportunities where like that could have happened, and that might have led to Kelly being like, "You got to let me go," and looking for a way out. Yeah, I could see that happening. Anyway, I
no,
interrupted you.
that's actually a good point. And I generally mean that. One thing I have an issue with, because like you, I have written, although not as much as you. I've only written like one short, and I've worked on some projects and a few scripts. Um, and one thing I suck at as a writer is romance, because I not to make anyone sad, I don't date a lot of people because I don't like people.
Oh no.
So I suck at
Sorry, I
writing.
shouldn't laugh.
No, you're good. You're good. I laugh at it. So, um, I suck at writing romance. I can write tragedy but I can't write romance very well. So the idea was like, I can give, I didn't feel like I can give the bittersweet ending to Danny. And also I would prefer things to have ended on a happier note anyway. So, but you're right. If because like Danny hit on the lawyer and like the waitress, and not the lawyer, the librarian, excuse me, and the waitress, and like one other person,
Doreen.
Doreen, yeah. And I was like, I could have introduced a love subplot, even if it was just kind of, talked a bit about, and then some of it was just yada yada in the background, right?
Right.
I didn't do that because I am bad at writing romance. So
What I
that
loved about it is it had a real that cozy mystery kind of thing where part of the fun of the show is seeing the two leads like handle conflict and like sh- sh- idealized love, which I love. I like seeing people who like care about each other and support each other, which as Hal and Raffi and Danny did, even though Danny was a little reserved.
I do want to go back to the thing real quick. Favorite NPC, quite frankly, was Stinky Pete, just because I love whenever a joke does come back on itself, references itself. There were many good NPCs. Don't get me wrong. I liked them. And some of them I liked even something as stupid as the character with the 4 last names, right?
Yeah. The aforementioned Sheriff Julia Roberts, yada yada yada
Yeah.
Namco.
Because sometimes I'll just love a concept, something stupid like having 4 last names or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
But because Stinky Pete kept coming back up, but not from me, but from you all making him in the situation, I was like, I can't not like him, to be honest.
Hell yeah.
um,
Jamie answered, "I am a phone," which is a reference to Walter Reed with 2 L's and 2 R's, to differentiate himself from the other Walter in the show and the actual Walter Reed Army Hospital. I would imagine.
that so I had to think about it, and sometimes I just improv on the spot, but I like to sometimes get in the head of some of the NPCs that are noteworthy, right? And in this case, when a person finds out that they're not real, like if you're not only not real by most people's standards, but also technically you're just a phone. Uh, that was him just kind of like having an existential crisis while dealing with an emergency at the same time. So it's like, I guess I'm a phone.
Okay, so here's the deal. We got Walter who I think turned into a sword at one point.
No, there was discussions behind the scenes about doing that, but Walter never got turned into a sword. So
Okay, so it was
there was
phone
talk.
here and sword here.
So there was phone, and then the RC Cola sword. A joke I did not think
And then
we come back
literal
to.
actual brand
Like,
new Walter as a
yeah,
human.
I did like the joke when I decided at the last moment of like Dream Walter, which is different from Phone Walter, which is when you all left is like, I guess I'm here now. All right.
Yeah. That's so great. So that's basically means we have 2 votes for Walter Reed and 2 votes for Stinky Pete.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm assuming that Az would vote Stinky Pete or
Right.
Walter. So that leaves Kelly as the tiebreaker. What do you think?
There you go.
It's like it's like when Ross Perot joined the election
Right,
and
right.
messed it up, and Bill Clinton got elected.
Most heroic moment, Hal sticking his head through the portal.
Oh my
Okay.
god, that's Jamie's pick.
Yeah, this is Jamie's pick. I'm gonna let you all know. I had mentioned this in that episode, and I stand by it. I did not expect Hal to dip his head into a portal. It was just meant to tease like the dream world, the collective subconsciousness, as I called it. I did not him just be like, and just stick his head on through. So
Was he the first one to go through the portal?
canonically, not the first meta creature because that's where like the hedge wolf, and
Oh shit, I totally forgot again that he was a meta creature. I just
yeah.
meant in that one scene in the woods was he's the
Oh,
first one to stick his whatever through.
oh yeah, yeah. Out of all the play, I think you in a previous scene in the library had tried to put your hand through it, but the portal was not set in that universe well enough for it to send you on through. But this is the first time you all actually had like an actual fissure through reality.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just how just dipped their head into it, which was the first time anyone had gone into the collective subconsciousness. On a side note to that, I did not expect that, and the reason why I brought that up is I had to explain the collective unconsciousness and and a person's travel through it when I didn't have it yet. I did not have that planned yet. I
Well,
think it took
here's the thing. The great thing about him being the first one to look through is that he should have no subconscious and memories and dreams to draw on.
that is correct. So that here's a bit of lore for you that I never brought up, and maybe we'll bring it up in the if we ever do a sequel, right?
This is Portal lore, folks.
Portal lore. He experienced the collective dreams and unconsciousness of everyone in the area, right? Technically, the creature's above all is a creature of all dreams, but whatever. In this case, he was like secluded to that island and maybe some surrounding area. But if you had gone searching for Hal's dreams, the only dream you would have come across is the one he had about the Mr. Nobodies. Because remember, Hal got the ability to see through the future. That would have been the only dream you would have found.
Had he seen them before he stuck his head in?
He had not.
Yeah,
And
I see.
in fact, if you notice, I sometimes gave you guys dreams, or I mentioned dreams, or like memories. I did not do any of that for Hal. The only time it
Yeah.
came up is you all had mentioned the Philadelphia incident. You all had mentioned the Philadelphia incident. I never did. Now, here's a note about that one as well. And I swear we'll go to the next one. I'm not trying to hold you all to every little
Well,
fucking note.
heroic moment. We really got to go around the horn because mine.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
Let me. I lost it. Most heroic moment. Danny trying to save Kelly.
Yeah,
She got sucked in, and he just like he didn't hesitate at all. He just like ran to grab her.
I will admit I did not expect that either, but I was like, this is a good character development moment. This allows me to bring in the concept of dream creatures being real, basically, and or at least physical in some aspects. So it allowed me to kind of world build a little and do something that's kind of nice. It was a moment that Danny and Kelly had. Because it'd be the first time in 6 months that we ever actually physically hold each other in any sense. So it was kind of a nice moment. I was like, I kind of like that. Even if I suck at romance, even I kind of like that. And maybe I could have done it a little better. Um, like when we were going through it. But I like if you ever did a comic, I'd probably extend that scene just a little bit. But yeah, I did like that moment. So I agree. It was a really good heroic moment. Because Danny did not hesitate, just straight in.
And that led to not this category, but maybe one of the most iconic images for me was when he could feel her and they could kiss.
Oh, for
That
certain.
that just came out of nowhere for me and was like, what? That's of course the first thing he would do.
And like I said, if I could ever turn this into a comic, I would literally have this scene. I also sometimes think in movies and TV and comic books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I imagine that in my head. And the scene would literally just be like a black empty void in the background with them just holding each other's hands for the first time. And it's just a focus on the hands before they go in for the kiss. And that's because I suck at, like I said, suck at romance, but that sounded very nice.
Yeah, hell yeah.